Good morning. Thank you all for waking up with the members of the St. Clair County Graduate Chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. We are the Alpha Beta Zeta Omega chapter serving the St. Clair County community. Welcome and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Financial Literacy Forum. My name is Ebony Buckles, and I am serving as the chair of the Build Our Economic Wealth Committee of the Alpha Beta Zeta Omega chapter. Financial literacy is recognized each year in the month of April to raise awareness of the importance of financial literacy and maintaining smart money management habits. Today, our chapter is answering the call to building personal, organizational, and community economic wealth. Before we get started with this dynamic program today, I would like to take a moment to introduce our president, the Honorable Zena R. Cruz, as she brings welcome.
Thank you, Ebony. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It is my honor to join you this morning with our guests who are experts in their respective fields of finance. Both topics they will cover today are particularly important to me as I get closer to retirement, which is very soon, maybe not as soon as I wish, but also as my adult children start navigating life as independents and start adulting. And as they consider home ownership, because that's probably going to be the next big step that they take in their lives. We, the women of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and specifically the St. Clair County Graduate Chapter, are dedicated to soaring in service and doing so by going above and beyond. So now I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Marshawn Warren, who's going to give us some more important information. Please enjoy the forum.
Thank you so much, and good morning to everyone. And I would also like to extend you a warm welcome and thank you so much for coming. Today we have a brief but power-packed forum for you. We will offer you an opportunity to view and hear from our experts. One of our experts, as our president has already mentioned, will give us some valuable information about home buying. And then our second expert will also give us some very, very valuable information about investments, which most of us don't necessarily know so much about. So again, we hope you enjoyed this brief but power-packed forum and you leave with a wealth of information for you to take some very necessary and valuable next steps. Thank you.
Well, I hope everyone is ready. I'm going to give you just one quick moment to go grab a pen and a piece of paper because our next expert speaker is going to give you some powerful tools and information. Deonte Cannon is a community development mortgage loan officer at Cadence Bank. He is an East St. Louis native, currently working and residing in St. Louis, Missouri. He graduated from Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville in 2008, where he became a member of the Iota Pi chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated in the fall of 2003. For the past 15 years, Deonte has diligently been working in the financial industry, fulfilling economic success in the community. For the past 7 years, Deonte has been working in community mortgage. He has a major love for his job, which he teaches. He enjoys helping people and then also helping people in the community reach the goal of home ownership. You all, I've worked with Deonte personally, and I've heard him before. You are in for a treat. Please feel free to use the Q&A throughout this session because I know that questions will arise. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to some and present to others, Mr. Deonte Cannon.
Thank you all for having me today. I'm Deonte Cannon, Community Development Loan Originator, Mortgage Loan Originator with Cadence Bank, as Ebony stated. Been in the industry for a nice little while here. Having fun watching the ups and downs, but I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get us going today. All right, let's see. All right, so today's presentation is going to be titled The Journey to Home Ownership. Today we're going to cover these objectives: the 4 keys to home ownership, home loan products, the home loan process, also what to expect at closing, and lastly, the life of a home loan. Okay, the 4 keys to home ownership. Number 1 is income and employment. Number 2, credit history and score. Number 3, available assets. Number 4 would be our property qualification factors. So these 4 things are going to be how we get to that journey to home ownership. All right, key number 1, income and employment. So income and employment plays a really big role in everything that we're looking at the bank. We haven't even gotten to what everybody likes to talk about, which is credit. Income and employment, you have to kind of start there. So we usually ask for a 2-year work history, whether that be in the same field or not. I know the presentation says same line of work. We would prefer it be the same line of work, but you can have different lines of work if you want to, as long as you can show a consistent 2-year work history in the same type of work. Meaning, if you were working with a W-2 job where they give you a W-2 at the beginning of the next year, we would love to see you have 2 years history of that. If you were working as a 1099 contractor, or if you're working as self-employed, which is practically the same thing on paper, we want to see you've been doing that for 2 years as well in that same industry consecutively. So also something people don't take into consideration, your education actually counts as a part of your work history. If you've graduated and to receive that degree in that field, the time that you were in school to do that, you actually get credit for that as a part of your actual work history. No, it doesn't count towards income because you really weren't making anything when you were doing that. Typically, you're paying to go to school. That's usually how it works. But otherwise, if they paid you to go to school, if you were making actual income at that time, you can use that income as well. So it'll still help you out in that situation. But typically, you did like I did. I worked while I was in school, but I wasn't working in the same field. So my history of that would count towards if I was going into that same job type afterwards. So you don't necessarily have to have 2 years work history, physical work history. You can have that on the job training and educational or vocational training that'll count with it as well. The reason we ask for that, we like consistency. So that's one of those things that I know it speaks about major concerns here, or concerns. Multiple job changes is like looking and asking someone if that you're trying to borrow money from you, hey, can I borrow money from you? But you got to look at it from the other way. If you're constantly bouncing from job to job to job, when it's time to pay me back my money, how do I know that you're going to have it? How do I know that you can? Because how do I know if you're working at this point in time? So a lot of things we do in mortgage is a story that we're telling based off the past to predict the future. So that's a good way of looking at it. So you can understand we're looking at your history, which is the same thing the next category is going to do as well. But thinking about that, multiple job changes is very inconsistent. Multiple employment gaps. You can have a 3 to 6 month employment gap. We're going to ask questions as to why. Because if you're taking those type of employment gaps, then we'll look at it from the standpoint of, hey, again, I don't know whether you'll be working at the same time that I will be doing, that I'll be needing that payment back. So think of it that way. So employment gaps is a concern and job changes is a concern. We usually look at, like I said, employment gaps can be anywhere from 3 months or longer, just depending on the program that we're looking at for you. So take that into consideration. Okay. Next, how much house can I afford? A lot of people ask this question. This is one of the biggest ones. They usually ask this question before they even have their credit pull, which is very funny that we do because one is based off the other. So looking at that, how much can I afford? There's a simple ratio that we do. There's 2 of them actually. So this is the first one. The first one is our housing to income ratio, also called your housing ratio for short. We basically just divide the total amount of the estimated home mortgage payment that you're going to be making by your monthly gross income. So that house payment is going to include your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. By your gross income, which is what you typically start with if you're a W-2 employee. So if you make $30 an hour and you work salary those 40 hours a week, that's what we're typically using for that gross income once we divide it back. So looking at the example, if you have a monthly gross income of $4,000 a month, your total monthly housing payment or estimated mortgage payment is what I'm going to refer to that as. You're looking at dividing that 1,000 by 4,000 and getting 0.25, which is 25%. You'll also hear this referred to commonly as your front-end ratio. So that's another way. If you hear somebody say or hear lenders say, hey, your front-end ratio is too high, that means that the percentage of your monthly payment for your actual mortgage is really high in comparison to your actual monthly income. And we haven't included anything else yet. That's what the next slide is going to do. So the next slide talks about the debt to income ratio, also called the debt ratio, also called the back end ratio. You hear it a few different ways depending on the lender and how their jargon works. They all mean the same thing. It's your debt to income ratio. So debt to income ratio takes the total amount of all your debts, credit debts that is, and it can include some payments that you may be making consistently too that might be going to creditors that may not show up on your credit report. There's ways we figured that out. But all those credit debts, monthly payment, minimum monthly payment, mind you, divided by the amount of your gross income again. So that's going to be higher typically than the first unless you have no debt. That's the only way they'll be identical. So the example that they give us for that is the monthly gross income is still $4,000 a month. The monthly estimated mortgage house payment is still $1,000. However, you have a monthly credit debt, $600 more. So what they're going to do is they're going to add that $600 to that $1,000. That's going to give us $1,600 and then divide by $4,000, which is your income for the month. And that's going to give us 40% basically. So 0.400, which is 40%. That's actually not a bad debt ratio. You can do a lot of things with a 40% debt ratio. All right. So next poll question, first poll question, actually, let's go to there. Give you guys a second to respond to this. So the first poll question is, what is the lowest credit score to purchase a home with? There are a few answers out there. So one answer is 780 plus. Second answer is 720 to 779. Third one is 680 to 719. The fourth one is 600 to 679. The last one is 0 or no credit score. Give you guys a second to figure this out. Seeing some really good guesses out here about this. All right, so I believe, okay, we still got a couple more people chiming in on this one. I guess we'll end it in another 15 seconds or so. All right, 5 more seconds. All right. So looks like the results we have here. Let's share these results with you guys. All right. So the results we have right now, there were, I see 18% said 720 to 779. 9% said 680 to 719. 55% said 600 to 679. And 18% said 0 or no score. Well, the survey says the answer is actually 0. There's no actual real credit score requirement. There are programs that take literally no score, which means you have no credit right now. So that's really interesting because going into the next phase we're talking about here, the key number 2 is credit history and score. So we know the credit score is typically a 3-digit score ranging from 350 to 850. Credit score can affect or reflects the likelihood of repaying your debts back. So that's another thing that's talking about the past. I know we were speaking about that when it came to income. Well, it matters for credit too. Your score may not reflect your history sometimes. Sometimes your history looks like it's a little bit better than your score actually is. There's different things that you can do to make that better. It's just the way that the particular algorithms are looking at it. There are many algorithms. I mean, hundreds of algorithms for credit scores because there are that many types of actual credit reports, whether they be the same that we normally use, TransUnion, Equifax, or Experian. There are different versions of those same things. There are different types. We have Vantage scores and we have FICO scores. Those have their own sets of algorithms altogether. So thinking about that, I mean, it's, like I said, it's a story that we're telling. So the better your history is, the more likely it will be that we could possibly do something to help you out when it comes to getting a mortgage. The worse it is, the reason that's what the number is trying to reflect the likeliness that you're going to pay it back. So the higher the number, the more likely you're to pay it back. The lower the number, the less likely you're to pay it back. Which that can reflect in different things like your credit, I'm sorry, not your credit, but your interest rate on a mortgage and things like that. And eligibility types too, because if there are too many history things that are wrong, we will tell you like, hey, we need you to go ahead and fix some of these things, take care of these type of things. You may need assistance even from a nonprofit to help you get those things together. That's what we're here to do, is try to help you in those situations. So things that we also consider a part of credit history and score, which is your rent and or mortgage payment history. Those things we're looking at a lot more now because that tells us how you kind of prioritize yourself. So if you're prioritizing things over your rent or the current mortgage you're already paying, and you're missing payments on those particular two items, then it's going to be a really hard find for us to get you something that we can get you in that'll be good for you, because it's not likely that you'll have a good history of paying us back. So third, this is how we can do the zero score, no score. Number 3 is non-traditional credit. Non-traditional credit are those things that you pay outside of any credit bill that you actually pay that shows up on your credit report. So that could be any type of bills that you pay as your utility bills. That could be cell phone bills. That could be, I mean, with some of the things that we do here, that could be something such as your subscriptions to different things that you have. Like Netflix is one of the ones that we use a lot. We've seen that come through. So people who don't have it, with your rent and mortgage, your rent history in this situation is considered a non-traditional credit as well. So different ways to look at it. So if you had no score, which means you have no active credit on your credit report, likely nothing in collections either. Although I've seen a couple of times people have had a couple of medical collections that show up, which technically aren't even credit items. It didn't generate a score because you didn't have anything to put with it. So if that's the situation, you're still considered a no score, which is fine. We can work with that. All right. So I got a couple things in Q&A right now. Let's see. Is it still important that we keep our credit card debt to income ratio below 30%? And is that specific to credit card debt, or does that include personal loans? So good question. So with that particular question, I will say honestly that 30% is a good thing. Honestly, 10% on credit cards is even better. The way your credit is probably looking at that is that how well can you manage your debt? That's why when you get past 30%, it's like, oh, you're starting to need this card a little bit more. You're starting to need it a little bit more. So that's why you'll hit that part on the 30%. But if you go down even to 10%, it even looks even better. That is specific for credit cards. With your personal loans, your credit really looks at your history of payment. So that's one of those things that you'll have to understand, is that history of payment. So if you're paying things out over time, then that makes it even better when you have those actual personal loans, which are considered installment loans on your credit report. So I would just make the regular payment on those. Unless you have a financial need personally to get rid of that loan, I will make the regular payment and call it what it is, because that's going to keep building that history of I can do it. I'm making payments, I can manage my money. So good question there. Let's see. Next question is, what is the best way for a new college graduate who is just entering the workforce to establish creditworthiness? If they don't have bills in their name already, like I was talking about with the no score, if they don't have bills in their name already, I would say look at secure products. So there are different types of that in credit builder products, which I know that we have one of as well. And most financial institutions work them a little bit differently. They're similar, but have little things that might be different. Looking at those things like secure credit cards, where you put down maybe a couple $100s to get a couple $100 on a credit card. Doing a couple of those, maybe secure loans as well. Those work the same way at banks, where you put money down to be able to get a loan for basically the same dollar amount. And you make monthly payments back to build and establish that credit worthiness and that history. So Those are two generically good ways to do it. It just takes time. Usually, like I said, everything we do in banking around mortgage seem to fall in some category of a two. So with credit, we're looking at 2-year history. That's what's going to be the strongest thing on your credit is the things you've done in the last 2 years. So great question there. Last question from this one that I've received. Is it a good idea for parents to add their college students as a user on one of their credit cards to help him or her establish credit? All right. So with that particular question, it's a couple different ways you can do that. If they're in college, the way I've seen it done, first of all, you're going to have to go back to the first question that I answered about how your utilization is on that credit card. That's one thing. The second thing is I would honestly recommend in those situations, if they can't get their own secure stuff, then they could add them on. And I would say not necessarily as an authorized user, but if you can add them on as a co-owner, it would be better for them. Because it'll take into that consideration when we see it. And in my opinion, I would do co-ownership without giving them a card. But they understand that we're doing this so that we can build that. And unless you want to give it to them to start teaching them responsibility in it, but at the co-ownership situation, you both are going to be responsible for it, and it's going to be like balanced in a way. So you can add co-owners onto cards if you want to. You can also add authorized signers. At the bank, we're starting to get more what we call hip to that with the authorized users. So sometimes they're going to disqualify those particular credit items if they needed a specific time frame for that mortgage program. So if we had required a 2-year history on 3 different trade lines, which is what we're talking about, then they'll probably disqualify that user account because you're not an owner on it. You're just an authorized user, authorized signer. So they may disqualify that particular account as one of your pieces of history, even though that's something that might be holding up your credit. That's why we're trying to look at it more specifically so people can show better credit worthiness. So good question there. All right. Those were the 3 questions that I received. So let me move forward here. So key number 3. Key number 3 is available assets for down payment and closing costs. This is a really fun topic to talk about. I really do like this one. I like it because we talk about acceptable sources. As it states in the slide, it says savings accounts. Well, that can be checking accounts, savings accounts, certificate of deposit accounts, investment accounts, anything that literally you can access that's at a bank account, that's in a bank account of some form. And that's why I said investment accounts as well. Those all count. So those can all be used as acceptable sources. Gift funds for a lot of programs can be acceptable sources as long as it's coming from somewhere that we can source. We always ask for this gift letter that's to be written for that, to be able to say that that's where the money is coming from or that's where the money came from. Down payment assistance. So down payment assistance, we accept that typically with most programs. I haven't came across one that we don't accept it with, but we do like that people have those other resources that we can use for that. So down payment assistance could be through Beyond Housing, Better Family Life, all those different places that have it. Like the counties sometimes have those programs. I know that's typically who the money goes through anyway, or the counties when it comes to that type of money. So it could be an employer down payment assistance because sometimes employers do it too. A lot of the times people don't realize this as well. Your 401k account that you may have at your job may actually offer the availability to allow you to use what you've already saved in your 401k towards your down payment for a home. That's something that's out there for a lot of people. I'm not going to say everyone, but I know a lot of places do that. Some unacceptable sources of assets, cash deposits, cash in general. We can call it that. Anything that typically says cash is going to have a hard time sourcing because we don't know the source of cash. You can't really tell where it came from. It's hard to do that. So when you see cash deposits in your bank account, it's going to be hard to know about. Even when we talk about money orders, those are hard to source because we don't necessarily know where they came from, what was used to get the money order with. Borrow funds. So when they talk about borrow funds, they're talking about going to get a loan to pay for the mortgage loan. We don't allow that. A grant is technically considered it's borrowed funds, but it's on the same property that we're using. So it's not going to be outside of that. That's why it's very specific when we talk about going to get a loan to pay for this loan. So you can't go to bank A to go get a personal loan, as we're going to call it, or installment loan, just to go turn around and give it to us at the mortgage company to pay for your cost for this loan. So that's one way of thinking about that. Exception, loan is secured and payment is disclosed. That's what they mean by secured. It's secured by the same property that we're purchasing. So that's how that works. All right. It's going to be time for the second poll question here. Let me pull that up. Second poll question is a down payment the only cost associated with purchasing a home? Let's see what you guys say. All right. Looks like I got my 10 out of 10 answer. Okay, we got 11 now, 12, 13. All right. We'll give it about 20 more seconds. It's a yes or no question. What do you guys think? All right, 10 more seconds. All right. So the consensus of everyone is that the answer is no. That is absolutely true. First of all, anytime I see a word only in a question, I always think no. That is absolutely true. The down payment is not the only cost. So, for example, if you hear someone say that they're doing 100% financing, you have to ask more questions, because are you just talking about the down payment, or are you talking about what we're going to next, which is closing costs? All right, so let's jump on over. All right, so closing costs. Closing costs can include a lot of different things. Property taxes are usually included. Homeowners insurance, the prepaid interest is a little bit more specific to prepaid interest, not just interest. Mortgage related fees such as loan origination fees if it applies, recording fees, survey fees if applicable, appraisal fees included in there. Mortgage insurance, not on conventional loans, but typically on government loans, if it has it, like FHA has it, you'll be paying for mortgage insurance out of that as well. Title insurance is different. Title insurance is from the actual title company to make sure that your home is covered from the day you purchased it and everything before it, making sure that title is clean. Attorney and document preparation fees typically are by the title company as well. So all those things are actual costs, and they can depend on the title company. They can come up different ways. Depend on the lender, they can come up different amounts as well. All right, so key 4, house qualification factors, things that people don't typically think about until it's almost too late. So appraisal is one of them. Appraisal is literally the person who is ordered through the bank. They're a third-party company that is usually somebody we don't know. We just send out the order and they pick it up. So it's totally unbiased. They go out and look at the property top to bottom and tell you what they believe that the property is worth based off the program that you're using. So if it's an FHA, then there's an FHA appraisal. If it's a conventional loan, then there's a conventional appraisal that they do. So different forms that they use. Same thing for VA, which is veterans. So insurance, so there are different types of insurance that are we talking about. There's homeowners insurance. We already covered a little bit of mortgage insurance, which isn't always required. Then there's also flood insurance. These things are all considered as a part of house qualification factors, which when it comes to flood insurance, I usually recommend people just run, because flood insurance has to be paid for 100% upfront. So as a part of that closing cost from the page before, that's what that goes back to. Typically, we will prepay some other things, but being able to have to do homeowners insurance and flood insurance, that's a bit much. It's really heavy on the pocket unless you want to spend that money. Inspections. So typically inspections are like home inspections where they go from the basement to the ceiling, to the roof, like on the inside and the outside. So they'll cover and look at your entire home that way. My programs typically don't require it, but I usually always recommend it if you can. Most realtors I work with usually recommend it as well too, because you want to know basically the report on what the house looks like as far as that's concerned, with any issues or so value, condition, and repair. That's usually what the inspection is going to tell you that may need to be done. And it'll just kind of give you the condition of the home as well too. All right. Home loan products. These are the general topics that we use for home loan topics or products. So there's the conventional loan, FHA, rural housing, VA, and specialty products. So conventional is our Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac investor products. So usually you can go up to 97% financing with these. Mortgage insurance, which I have to explain, mortgage insurance covers the investor, not you. That's why people typically don't want it. So So in conventional loans, you can go have that removed after 80%. So what that means is that you pay 20% into it. It might not be required to pay that, but most people who put that 20% down, they usually have to, they're trying to get around having to pay mortgage insurance, which lowers their monthly payment. More sensitive to down payment and credit score. So that's one of those programs that you'll see that if you make a larger down payment, you may have a lower interest rate. If you have a great credit score, you may have a lower interest rate, and vice versa. So it's kind of looked at that way. That's how it's tiered. That's how they price it. That's how it works. So the rest of these, with the exception of specialty products, are considered government loans. FHA is the most popular of the government loans. It only requires usually a 3.5% down payment, assumable, meaning that you can sell your property to someone else. You can sell your kind of like selling your loan to someone else. You can sell the property with the mortgage to someone else. All they have to do is come to the bank and qualify just like they were buying a house anyway. And then they'll just take over your mortgage from there. No income limit. It doesn't have an income limit on it, so you don't have to worry about if you make too much. If you make a lot of money in there, it's still fine. You can do that. Rural housing is for people who want to live in those rural areas. That's part one. It doesn't require a down payment. Household income limits do apply because it's meant for low to moderate income people. That's the part that's not shared all the time. When people typically talk about this, and I already mentioned that you got to be in what they consider to be a rural area to do that particular property. VA is another government loan that's for veterans or active duty people or people with eligible spouses that were for veterans as well. So no down payment, 100% financing, which is the same thing as no down payment, no monthly mortgage insurance required. So they don't have that on there anyway. They do have what's called a funding fee. Sometimes they might be able to get around it. Most of the time you will not. It's based off a percentage of the actual mortgage that you're doing. But that's only paid for once. It's not paid for many times. It's only once. Specialty products. So these are things that my bank particularly offers. There are specialty products, our medical professional loan, right at home, and our right at home emerging communities loans, which the next slides will go over some of this. So with specialty products, the medical professional loan that we have here, if you're looking to purchase on the St. Louis side, I'll say, because I know that these products aren't used for over there. Medical professional loan will go up to 100% loan to value with no mortgage insurance required, and available for purchase, refinance, cash out, refinance, and also on primary and secondary residences for that particular one too. They didn't put that in here, but it is. The Right at Home program is meant for low to moderate income people or people who are moving to low to moderate income areas. It'll do 100% financing with home purchases and refinances. Again, this is something on the St. Louis side. Reduced fees, no mortgage insurance, flexible sources of down payment and closing costs, and also available with our construction and renovation to permanent products that we use as well. With up to what they said, 90% loan to value just means you have to have a 10% down payment for that particular version of it. The last one on here is our Right at Home Emerging Communities program, which is all the same rules that was on the original Right at Home, except you do not have to be low to moderate income. You just have to be moving to what we consider to be a majority minority area. Same rules apply, no mortgage insurance, up to 100% financing, and also flexible sources of down payment and closing costs accepted as well. So the process, really quickly here, this is what the process looks like. Typically, a lot of people go to open houses first, which is where they get with the realtor. Other people who go to the bank first, you're going to end up at the bank anyway. So you have to get pre-qualified for a mortgage first with a mortgage lender like myself. Then you have to do the actual application part of it. So pre-qualification is you basically doing the work ahead of time and getting it to us with that particular application. What we're considering to be an actual application is when you actually have a sales contract accepted on both sides. So you already found the house, you have the address, you have already agreed on what you're going to be buying. That's when you send that information over to me and we start an actual application when we have that last piece. Disclosures will go out, letting you know all the information, at least the pre-disclosure, so that you know what we're looking at as far as numbers are concerned. So you'll get actual form documents with that. You usually don't even have to ask for it because it's required for us to send it. Document collection, I usually do all the document collection in pre-qualify stage, so we don't have to come and do a lot of document collection at number 4. Number 5, processing. So my processor is the one who takes all those documents and looks over to make sure they apply to the program before giving it to number 6, who is the underwriter, which is the part of the underwriting process. And they're the decision maker. So they're going to say, does this really apply to this program with everything you've given me? Do I have any questions as far as the underwriter is concerned? If the answer is no, then we skip to number 7. If the answer is yes, I have questions, I go back to number 5 and go back to number 6 and start over again through that part of the process. So when you hit processing, you're typically almost done with the process. You're over halfway done. Underwriting, like I said, once you make it through there, you'll be pretty much done. At final approval, that's when you go to what'll be on the next slide when we talk about what happens next after you go through final approval, which means that you're basically done with the bank on that part of it. And you have to go through your actual closing, which is when you sign all those documents. What to expect at closing? Review and sign documentation, usually a lot of it. I've seen anywhere from 75 pages all the way up to 120 something pages because it was a government loan and it had grants involved. So the more things you have involved, the more paperwork is going to be at the end. So pay applicable closing costs and or down payments. So you're going to get a cashier's check from your bank and you're going to get it made to the title company, not to the lender, not to the realtor, none of that, just to the bank. That way just to the title company that you're using. And that's how it'll be paid. Everything is going to be paid from the title company. So they get paid to disperse all those funds appropriately. The last thing is have a photo ID accessible and on hand and make sure it's valid. If it expired yesterday, you might want to go get you a new ID, at least a temporary ID with that ID so that you'll have something valid, because if it's not valid, they're not going to take it. And that's going to hold up the entire process until that's done. So keep that in mind. That's one of those things that slides by on people. Life of the loan. So important to make your payments on time. Yes, we know that. Learn more about escrow, your annual escrow analysis. So you'll get information about your escrow account, which is just a savings account that we hold from your monthly payment if it is escrow for your taxes and your insurance. So that's where that money goes into that escrow account so we can make the payment for you. If you have questions with your mortgage, contact your loan expert like myself. Beware of solicitations that are not from mortgage lenders or from your actual title company. I'll put that on the end of there because after you close on your home, you're likely going to get a lot of people saying you can get your deed with us. Well, technically, you already have a copy of your deed after closing. So people will try to get you to pay them to give you the same thing you already have. So be aware of those things coming out. Like I said, if it didn't come from the actual title company or from the lender, I wouldn't pay it any attention. Just shred it and keep going. All right. I am done. Thank you guys for having me today, and I do appreciate it. If you have any questions, you guys will get my contact information to be able to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that powerful amount of information. I have been getting so many people that have been texting me and asking for your information. So thank you for putting that up. Before we get started to our next part of the session, we do just have one more question that you could answer for us, please, Deonte. So sometimes realtors ask for pre-approval letters before showing the properties. Now, is that letter something a person will automatically get during the pre-qualification phase?
Excellent question. So yes, during the pre-qualification stage, once we have come to the conclusion that this is what you can do, you will get a pre-qualification letter. That's where we start at. That's why I say people typically will see a lender or see a realtor and then end up back at step 1, which is pre-qualified, because they need that letter. So yes, absolutely.
If we have any more questions, right now would be the perfect time to do it. Just drop it in the Q&A really quickly before we get started with our next expert. All right, again, well, Mr. Cannon, thank you so much again for all of your information. And now I'll turn it on to Marshawn.
Thank you so much. I have the honor and pleasure of introducing Charles or Chuck Richards. Just an awesome person, wonderful person to be our next expert today. So Charles is originally from Baltimore. However, he has resided in Belleville, Illinois since 2006. He came to Edward Jones in 2014 because he wanted to help individual investors work toward achieving their financial goals. Prior to joining Edward Jones, he graduated with merit from the U.S. Naval Academy in 2002, as well as he achieved his bachelor's degree in political science from Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville. He has served as a nuclear submarine officer, and his military service included deployment in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. I'm sorry, his bachelor's in political science came from the Navy Academy, but he earned his MBA degree from Southern Illinois University in 2010. He is a member of the Greater Belleville Chamber of Commerce. He volunteers as a local admissions representative for the U.S. Naval Academy and serves on his local YMCA board. His most gratifying role, however, is that of a family man. So his spouse, Kayla, is an elementary school teacher, and they have 3 beautiful daughters. Personally, he's a sports enthusiast. He enjoys an active lifestyle, volunteering, and community outreach. So again, it is my honor to introduce to you my friend as well, Charles R. Chuck Richards. Thank you so much.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Marshawn, for the great introduction. And really just thank you all just for having me, as a guest speaker. Really do, appreciate it. And I'm honored to have the opportunity to really just share some info. And hopefully, by the end of, my talk, you take some good info from it, and everybody is more informed, and also more educated. And Deonte, I also want to thank Deonte for just the great info and presentation that he gave, and basically, just let everybody know there's a perfect tie-in when it comes to the investments, and home ownership also. So, so as far as getting rolling, I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to navigate, through the slides. But I definitely will pause, once or twice for questions also, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. One other brief thing too I do want to bring up is that when it comes to investing, just a personal story of mine is that I was at the Naval Academy, and 21 years old at the time, many years ago, and we got our first bonus. And it was a $10,000 bonus. It's probably much larger now. And I remember just not knowing what to do with it, right? So not knowing what to do, and I, turned to my roommates, and they were all familiar with investing, right? So they, knew mutual funds and stocks, and my parents were great. They taught us a lot of things financially about budgeting, but they just didn't have that knowledge when it came to investing. And that speaks to really just the wealth gap that we see in this country, between our community and some of the majority or white communities, and that's something that we really do want to help close that wealth gap also. So long story short, though, is that I was able to kind of school myself on investing, and when I came to Edward Jones in 2014, I just absolutely built upon that knowledge, got licensed, and been helping a lot of families all over the country. So really briefly, one other disclaimer is that I'm going to talk in general terms. I know we've got a lot of folks on the Zoom today, and there's probably varying levels of investment sophistication, right? So when I cover the slides, some of it may seem really basic to some folks if you're familiar with investing. So just bear with me, just kind of treat it as a review. But for other folks, this may be their first time actually, seeing these things or hearing of these concepts. So there's no such thing as a bad question. Definitely ask away throughout the presentation. And in addition to that, I'll won't be able to speak on any specific stocks or investments. We're in a highly regulated industry, but if you do have a question on a specific stock, definitely feel free to reach out to me, afterwards also. So, all right. But as far as, moving ahead, let's go ahead and get everything here. When it comes to investing, basically we want everybody to realize generally it's good to follow a process. And that's something that Edward Jones is really, really big on. So when you're looking at your own personal situation, and keep in mind, your situation may be totally different than someone else or your neighbor, even though you may be the same age and have the same occupation, you name it. So really when it comes down to it, we want you to start with assessing, hey, where are you today? Take an honest look. Where do I want to be? And then basically you can kind of continue from there as far as, can you get there? What things can you do or how can you get there? And then you do want to monitor things and make sure you're staying on track, right? So I think we all realize, right, the market changes, stocks, bonds, et cetera. Your life changes, life situations, marriage, divorce, kids, loss in the family. All these things can affect your goals and your progress towards those goals. So that's what we help families do, is really just kind of help step back and take a look at that big picture also. So some of the basic principles, and then I'll show you just an outline on some of the topics that we'll kind of dive into. But you can see here is that with Edward Jones, we are different in that we focus on individual investors, right? So we are a full service firm. And basically what that means is that we are actually, guiding those families on an individual basis and really giving more personalized advice. And then we do have a long-term investment philosophy. So actually, if you're watching Super Bowl commercials and you're seeing all these different advertisements out there, I think a lot of things come at us as far as ways to get rich quick. And in reality, it doesn't work that way, right? So it really does take that long-term perspective, having a disciplined approach to investing. And that is really the proven strategy to help folks, reach their long-term goals. Yeah. Very rarely does someone, get rich quick by, buying shares of, stock when it was really, really in its infancy stages, and then basically, generating a lot of wealth like that, right? It takes time, it takes time. Otherwise, everybody would do it, right? So. All right, so for today, this is what we are looking at, and we're going to dive into these a little more. But we'll talk about, developing that strategy. We're also going to get into basically sticking with quality. I'll talk a little bit more on that, and maybe some things to avoid. Diversifying. We'll probably spend maybe the largest amount of time there as far as diversifying and why that's so important when you are managing your investments or your investment portfolio. And then at the end, we'll get into, basically that long-term approach, and then ways that you can focus on what you actually can control. And then if we have time, I will go ahead and basically cover different types of accounts and, what the pros and cons or benefits of those types of accounts are. So, all right, so you got a survey question out there. So this is good. And I'm going to see the results come in, but the question is, how confident do you feel about your ability to retire comfortably? Right. And this is anonymous, by the way, so all of the results are anonymous, and we'll see what everybody says. All right, we'll just go for another maybe 20 seconds or so. Okay. All right. So yeah, so what we've got is basically, so we've got one person who's very confident, very, very confident in their ability to retire comfortably. Most of the folks, so 64%, actually answered somewhat confident, which is good. And then we've got 3 folks that said not sure, right? Not sure. Thanks for doing that. That is, probably, even a little better than what we typically see, because studies actually show that about 3/4 of Americans, 3/4 of Americans have a retirement shortfall. All right, so when you factor in inflation, and just the fact that folks generally aren't investing enough or saving enough for retirement. Most folks do have a retirement shortfall, and all that means is basically that when you factor in life expectancy and what folks want to do in retirement, right, the lifestyle they want to live, whether it be travel, you name it, the money just doesn't add up to be able to support living that lifestyle that they envision, right? That they would, run out of money at some point in retirement. So, so thanks for the survey and thanks for doing that. Right. All right, so rule number one, just talk about developing a strategy. So when we're looking at developing a strategy, as I mentioned earlier, really what you are looking at doing is wanting to take a step back and really just lay down a blueprint for what you want to achieve. Whether that be retirement, saving for your kids' college, saving for a home down payment, as Deonte was talking about, right? So that's really where it starts, where it starts. And what we encourage folks to do is we get it right. We know no plan's perfect. Things are going to change, but at least have a blueprint. Most of the time, we're helping folks with their retirement planning, right? So what age do you want to retire? How much do you plan on spending, right? How much do you need to invest in order to have the money that you're going to need? What guaranteed income sources are you going to have in retirement? And by guaranteed income, we're talking about things such as pensions, Social Security, et cetera. Social Security is another topic that's it's a presentation on its own, but all those different things factor in, right? And typically it's good to have a professional helping you out when it comes to, these things, right? So you lay that blueprint down, and then from there, we're able to help formulate that plan and then adjust to changes as necessary, right? So that's that long-term approach. If you do have young children and you're saving for college, right, that's a very finite window that you have, typically 18 years, right? So it's not like retirement, right? So you've just got 18 years to be able to do that from the time they're born until, they reach college age. So one thing you can't replace in investing is time. So usually what we'll recommend is start early. If it fits in your budget, don't wait until they're 10. I mean, you've lost a whole decade of potential earnings. Definitely you want to start that earlier, if possible. All right, next I'll talk about sticking with quality. All right, and this is for any investments. You really do want to make sure that you are investing in quality, long-term investments. When we look at things, you can see on the screen there examples of things such as gold, digital. And what I mean by digital, we're talking about crypto, et cetera. I know that was a big thing out there right now. Marijuana stocks. So those haven't been, federally regulated. So generally speaking, when we're talking about like your retirement nest egg, again, you want to do something that is proven. You want to invest in stocks, mutual funds, companies that are well proven, not new things that have, just come out, right? And real estate can be a great thing there. So obviously, yes, we want home ownership, et cetera. But what we're talking about is, different types of real estate from, an investment perspective where you can have some other risks, right? Home ownership is great, right? But we're talking about different things there. So again, invest in quality investments that are proven, and that will help you, reach those long-term goals. Next, we're going to get into diversification, right? All right, so when we're talking here, and I know you can see the triangle that's there that represents different asset classes. I'll put up another slide to go a little bit more in depth there. But when it comes to reaching your long-term goals, we really do stress the importance of diversifying, just because when you're looking at things, studies have found that is going to be the largest determining factor of your long-term returns, right? So it's not timing the market. A lot of folks think, oh yeah, I can time the market. I know when to sell, I know when to buy. It's more of having that proven, again, investment strategy over the long term and having the right types of investments inside of your various accounts, right? And that's what we call asset allocation. All right, give you a quick example, and these are extreme examples, but on one end, a few years ago, I met with a prospect who worked for Boeing here in St. Louis. In his 401k, right? You know, you can put the various investments. His 401k was 100% invested in Boeing stock, right? Boeing Airlines, right? There's a lot of risk in that, right? A lot of risk. And when you look at what we went through in the pandemic and what the airlines went through, right? That's, again, a perfect example, right? If someone's looking to retire from Boeing and we go through a situation or a big market decline, obviously that's, you know, a lot of stress, and that can really wreak havoc on their retirement plans. Other example on the far end, opposite end, is I've had folks come to me and actually say, hey, Chuck, I've got a Roth IRA. I'm set. I'm putting money into my Roth IRA or my traditional IRA. And when we look under the hood, so when we look at their investment statements, what I noticed was 100% of their IRA was in money market, right? So it was basically sitting in cash, not really working, not earning a return. And it had been doing this for years, right? So that's a lot of money left on the table just because they didn't have it properly, you know, allocated. So, so it's really, really important there. So what I'm going to do is, everybody should be able to see this portfolio objective. So this is just an example of how we would recommend someone allocate their portfolio. And keep in mind that this is an example, right? So this is based on someone who may be a certain age and risk comfort level, right? This may not necessarily fit your goals, your specific goals. Again, things are going to change. If you're about ready to retire, it's probably different than someone who's maybe 23 or 24 just entering the workforce, who can take on a lot more risk because they have a lot more time for that money to bounce back or grow. So when we look at asset allocation, you see here, we're talking about how to, you know, build this portfolio. At the bottom, you've got cash and, you know, money market, right? So we're recommending just a small percentage there, because again, you want the majority of your money actually working and earning a return for you. Fixed income investments as we move up. We'll talk a little more about this here shortly, but these are your interest bearing investments. You can see on the right here what type of things are inside of it. Recommending 25 to 40%, again, for this portfolio objective. And then above this, basically, are what we call equity investments, right? So equity, just think ownership, right? Or just like Deonte was mentioning, right? You've got home ownership, you're building equity in that home or in that property. Just think the same thing for investments, right? With equity, you are actually, you know, owning shares of a publicly traded company, right? And that can be in the form of a stock. It could be in the form of a mutual fund, right? Your stock, you may own Home Depot shares, right? And that's going to fluctuate, you know, throughout the years, et cetera. Or you may own a mutual fund, which we'll get into here a little shortly. But not all stocks, not all mutual funds are created the same, right? So there's different types. We've got large cap, which are more of your more well-known multinational corporations. And then we move on, we've got small and mid cap. These are, you know, more of your startups, right? Typically going to grow more, but there's also more risk there. So as you move up this visual, so as you move up from the bottom part of cash, on up all the way up to aggressive, you know, you're taking on more risk, right? And again, you want to be balanced. You don't want to have, you know, as the saying goes, too many eggs in one basket. Right. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause here for brief Q&A just to see what questions are in. Notice a lot of info. All right. All right, so one question we've got is, what is the best starting point for building a retirement plan or investment portfolio if my husband and I only have a few $100s available in our budget to pay on a monthly basis? Okay, it's a great question. And what we typically recommend for that is basically, number one, you do want to make sure you have that emergency fund set up first, right? So we never want to put the cart ahead of the horse. It is important to make sure, first of all, that you do have just, what we typically recommend 3 to 6 months of living expenses saved up if you can for an emergency fund, and then getting into investing for the retirement. All right. And the reason why we say that is that if you put those funds right in a retirement account first, retirement accounts do have age restrictions, and then there can also be some tax penalties. If you're, for example, if you're under age 59 and a half and you withdraw from your 401k or IRA, there's an extra 10% penalty, and that withdrawal may be taxable, right? So we wouldn't want you to have to go through that. So it's important to just build those first building blocks first. Okay. Good questions. All right, perfect. I think that's all for now. So we're going to continue on, and we'll open it up for some more Q&A, here at the end. Right. All right, so we talked about bonds earlier. So what is a bond? Basically, a bond is an IOU, right? So you as the investor are essentially loaning your money to the issuer, which could be, a municipality. It could be a corporate bond, meaning that a corporation's trying to raise funds for maybe some of their projects. And then what they're in return are going to give you is interest, right? They're going to pay you interest. And then you get your face value back when that bond matures. So that's what a bond is. They are typically lower risk compared to stocks, in the stock market, but they're an important part of your portfolio. Because they're lower risk, they also do tend to have typically lower rates of return. But again, it is important to have that because they do buffer you historically. I know this didn't happen last year in 2022, right? Everybody pretty much saw their accounts, drop, all right, which occasionally is going to happen. That is normal with investing. But basically, when you're looking at bonds, they typically will increase when stocks decrease. Perfect example, 2008, great, financial crisis. Bonds actually had a positive return that year when everything was, as volatile as it was. All right. Bull and bear. So now we're talking about stocks, and basically when you're looking at, bull and bear market, if you've heard those terms, I was talking about just the general trend of the stock market, right? So just think, if you're, hate to give you this video, but if you are, gored by a bull, right? A bull's horns, they're going to go up, right? So whereas a bear, if you're getting mauled, right? They're going to maul you, and, that motion is downwards, right? So that's actually where they get those terms from, bull and bear market. And obviously, bull market's good, right? Everybody wants their investments to be increasing over time. And historically, that's what most years are like. Most years are actually positive in the market, but occasionally we will have a down year in the market too. So it doesn't mean that necessarily everything is wrong or something's wrong with your strategy. But if you aren't working with a financial professional, we encourage you to do so, and they can give you some more feedback there, on your portfolio. All right. And before I get into this slide, talk a little bit more about stocks. One example too is, I'm big into sports, as Marshawn mentioned, right? Even if you've got a great team, whether it be the 96 Bulls, Golden State Warriors now, you name it, we don't expect, that team to be undefeated, right? For the course of the season. They're going to have a bad game. They're going to lose some games. And it's the same way with the market, right? Most years, if you've got a properly diversified portfolio, you're going to have a positive return most years. But just because you have one bad year, don't let that dissuade you from sticking to the plan if you have a proper plan set up, right? We expect it. We expect that there's occasionally going to be a bad year in the market, right? So speaking about stocks, really briefly here, what we're talking about is buying or selling, right? So when you have a stock, a lot of the growth is going to be the share price. In this basic example, someone bought a share, you name any company XYZ for 20 bucks, they sold it for 30, so you got a $10 capital gain. So that's the case there. So that's how a lot of money is made actually, in individual stocks. One other way to make money is off of dividends, right? So a lot of your well-established companies will pay dividends quarterly, and they'll pay that even if the share price has dropped, right? So a lot of companies have paid dividends, going back decades, early, 1900s, some even going back to the 1800s. And that's another way to get a return, off of the individual stocks in your portfolio. All right. Next, we'll get into packaged investment products, and then we've got a few more slides, and then I'll get ready to wrap up here. But this is so important because the majority of investments out there, in the market are actually packaged products, meaning that they're not going to be an individual, stock. They're not going to be an individual bond. They're mainly going to come in the form of a mutual fund. And when we're talking about a mutual fund, essentially what you're getting is automatic diversification, right? We already talked about why that's so important. And then you are getting professional management. So in that mutual fund, and again, you want to have the right type of mutual fund. That's where we come in as financial advisors. But in a mutual fund, typically you're going to have multiple stocks inside of that one fund, or multiple bonds. And the fund manager, right? These are the folks in New York or Boston, typically. They're all over the world, but they're going to actually be deciding and selecting what stocks to put in or take out of that fund, right? So same things with mutual funds. You've got a bond mutual fund. A lot of it's based off of interest, right, that you're getting. If it's a stock mutual fund, you're actually looking at, dividends, capital gains, as far as the return. So as I mentioned before, in the examples I gave you, it's so important basically to know what's under the hood in your portfolio. I've come across so many families where they've got their 401k, they've got their IRA, but they don't know what's actually inside of it, right? And that's, again, so important because that's actually going to determine how your account's performing, right? If it's not growing like you want it to, or if it's taking a steeper dive or decline, that really means that, hey, potentially something's not, matching up. Right. We talked earlier about investing for the long term. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but one thing I do want to mention is that basically you do have the importance of dollar cost averaging, making sure that you are investing consistently. Studies show that you are going to get more shares over time. In this example, you can see someone on the left investing $5,000, lump sum right at once, whereas the person on the right actually got more shares. They have 300 shares versus the 250 shares because they did consistently, break it up over time. So what I encourage folks to do, whether it be your 401k, IRA, if you can, set up some sort of automatic investment program where your money is going into that account. You're paying yourself first, but it's going there automatically. It's out of sight, it's out of mind. And then you can increase that amount as you get raises or promotions, et cetera. All right, and then focus on what you can control. So we're just about at the are sort of things that you do have at least some control over, and the amount that you're investing each month. So really, really important. All right. One other thing, just before I wrap up, I know I'm right on 30 minutes here, is edwardjones.com/financial fitness. These are some ways that families can actually, just learn some of the basics or go a little deeper dive. It is interactive. I've got an app that you can download, but really, really informative and helpful info, on this site. And there's no cost for this, either. So speaking of that, if anybody does have any questions, before I turn it over to Marshawn for Q&A, or if you do, want a complimentary portfolio review, there's no cost for that either. If someone decides that they, want to work with a full service advisor, whether it be myself or someone else, but hopefully that individual will let you know up front, hey, based on the amount of money you have, what you're looking to do, these are the anticipated cost, of our services. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to some more Q&A. And actually, I'll let Marshawn kind of navigate the Q&A. But I just want to thank everybody again. And I'm here as a resource.
Thank you so much, Charles, for an awesome presentation. Here's Charles' contact information. Again, if you are interested in just speaking with him about taking the next steps, preparing for your retirement, and looking into some investments. So, Charles, we do have 2 questions here in the chat, and so I'll go ahead and get started with the first one. So discussions about stocks, diversification, investment portfolios, and bull and bear markets are intimidating. Is contacting a financial advisor the best first step if you don't have a lot of assets or liquid funds, or should a person try self-help apps and online programs?
Yeah, great question there. And the way I like to put it is that everybody's got to start somewhere, right? I gave the example of myself back when I was in college. I knew nothing of, really investments in stocks. So yes, it can be intimidating. I do realize that. It can be very intimidating if you're unfamiliar with it, but I do recommend, contacting, an advisor, someone that can help you understand the basics. And if that advisor is working in your best interest, which, technically we're all required to do, is to work in the client's best interest, they can tell you, hey, we recommend starting with this, or setting up this account first, building up that emergency fund prior to maybe opening an account, with them right away. So I do recommend, in summary, speaking with an advisor, and they can, at least point you in the right direction. Hopefully, even if it's not with them or starting, an investment account right now, they can at least point you in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for our next question, other than the money we put into our investment portfolio, what other fees are associated? For example, commissions, financial advisor fees, or investment firm fees?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. So basically, everybody's, got to get paid for, services, no matter what, industry you're in. And hopefully, the firm and the advisor is going to be transparent about it. So whenever you're looking at an investment firm, and it's going to vary, so fees are going to vary from firm to firm, typically across the industry, right now, the majority of firms are what we call fee-based. And what that means is that you pay a percentage fee based on the size of your account. And that's how that firm is compensated. And then of that money that goes to the firm, that advisor will typically receive a percentage of that amount. So that's how it's done most of the time these days. There are still some investments where there is an upfront commission. So those still are out there. And again, given someone's situation, that may be appropriate or it may not be appropriate. It really is a case-by-case basis. But generally speaking, most of the time it is a percentage fee based on the size of the account, also.
Perfect. And I have two more questions for you, Charles, if you don't mind. So how do the risk of investments compare with the potential rewards?
Yeah, so great question. And really for those, they do go hand in hand typically. Lower risk investments are going to have, lower returns typically, right? So just think money market. So technically a money market fund is an investment. Low risk, but generally speaking, lower returns. Whereas your more aggressive investments, your stocks, mutual funds maybe for developing, countries, et cetera. There's a lot of growth potential there, but a lot of risk. So they do, generally speaking, go hand in hand. There is a strong correlation.
All right. And our final question, which is in the Q&A, says, from time to time, not regularly, I trade options, which I've learned are very tricky/risky. So do you provide education on those options?
Great. I think the key was in the question there. So options are definitely a more advanced strategy. And, we all had to go through those in our training to get licensed. But generally speaking, because it is a more advanced strategy and most folks aren't ready for them, we don't offer it, at least at Edward Jones, we don't offer options to our clients. There are though some online platforms and other firms that do offer options, but that's just a trade-off of our firm. We realize that for the majority of folks, they're just not ready yet for options, and we don't, offer that.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, Charles, for a very informative presentation. Again, to our attendees, his contact information is here on the screen, and I am going to turn it over to our president, the Honorable Zena R. Cruz, for closing.
Thank you.
Almost started talking before unmuting. While this has been an extraordinary presentation and our experts have provided a wealth of information. And I want to thank our experts for being with us today, Mr. Deonte Cannon with Cadence Bank and Mr. Charles Richard with Edward Jones. They've done an awesome job today. We want to continue to support them, and both Mr. Cannon and Mr. Richards have provided some additional information that we will be making available to you. First, Mr. Cannon has shared information about a loan program available through Cadence Bank, and it's called the Credit Builder Loan. And this unique program is designed to provide an opportunity to build your credit worthiness. We heard him talk about just how important it is and how it comes into play, particularly with purchasing a home. So this is probably something, particularly if you have issues or concerns regarding your credit, to contact him about. And I'll tell you later how to get this information. And then Mr. Richards provided information about an upcoming educational seminar. You heard him talk about, becoming knowledgeable and learning about this. And we always talk about education is key. It's not just an adage, it is true to the point of trying to make good decisions. And this is coming up on May 11th at Bella Milano. And it's a 4-part dinner seminar, and it will cover areas of finance to help you become prepared to reach your financial goals. So how do we get that information? First, let me thank all of our attendees for being here today. We hope that you've gotten out of it just what you were expecting, and we hope you've actually gotten more. And so we want to share the information about the Credit Builder Loan, as well as the seminar titled Key Life Decisions. Are you prepared? And so we need your help. Our chapter wants to continue to offer relevant information and service to our community. So in about a day or so, you are going to get a survey, and it will come from the same Zoom address that you've gotten your reminders and your registration information. And if you complete that survey, you'll have instructions at the end to screenshot the screen that pops up saying you're done. with your survey. If you email that according to those instructions, then you will receive the information about the credit builder loan as well as the upcoming dinner seminar at Bella Milano. We want to invite you to follow us on our social media accounts as well, including our YouTube account, where we will upload this particular forum for you to review. And we are on Facebook, Twitter, on Instagram. So please follow us. And as the kids say, like, share, retweet, subscribe, all of those fun verbs. So thank you so much for being here today, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.